My name is Patrick Flanagan. I'm an audio architect at THX. I work in research. We're going to talk about spatial audio, perception, and headphones. Now we're going to talk about some research that I'm working on. Obviously, it's a big headphone show, and headphones have a lot to do with binaural rendering and audio. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let's just move on to the next slide. I'm sure you're all familiar with THX, maybe. Let's see if this plays. There we go. That was a very old trailer, but been working on different ways to present spatial audio. That trailer is actually mixed to be played back on 2 speakers on a laptop. So if you go to the YouTube video and you play that video, and you play it on laptop speakers, roughly like a MacBook Pro, it's going to sound wider than it actually is. So you're going to get some movement. That's some of the things that we were trying to play with. I'm audio architect, like I said, spatial audio research. THX, been around since 1983. Cinema, we develop technologies and algorithms for music and movies and Hollywood. You know, VR is a new, weird area of things that are happening for audio and film. And there's not a lot of understanding of what is going on, and that's one of the areas of my main focus. So currently, THX plays in this giant ecosystem of tablets, PCs, digital content, personal entertainment, automotive, home theater, cinema, live, AR, games, VR. Kind of look at anything that can process, anything that has a processor in it is kind of where we can live, and it plays audio and it plays video. So obviously we want to understand how you can make that experience better. So the agenda for today, we're going to talk about perceptual audio testing, THX and NYU research, VR localization and user behavior, and headphone measurement, and questions at the end. You can ask questions at any time. It's pretty informal. So let's jump right into perceptual audio. So what is perceptual audio? It's a listening test with a meaning, and there's usually a hypothesis. We usually have a question in our mind, and we present these set of questions to a group of humans to listen, right? So you got to train the humans because otherwise they don't know what they're trying to do. And why we do this is we're trying to add insight into what measurement can't do. Like, you can put a microphone on a speaker, and you get a response, but there may be something about that speaker that you can't measure, or something about that speaker in the box that you can't measure. And that's why you need listening tests. One of the areas we do is we study whether stimuli are identical. So if you take a binaural renderer, like we're going to talk about in a minute, and another binaural renderer, and you compare them, are they different? So Facebook and Google all have something for spatial audio, amongst a bunch of other companies. Which one's better? So you have to use a perception test because you can't quantify that with a microphone. What listening tests don't do is they don't identify system design parameters, and they don't identify what technical aspects would make a competitor's product superior to yours. So if you make a headphone, and I make a headphone, and we do some listening tests, I can't figure out from perception why your headphone may be better than mine. I can kind of have clues, but I can't replicate that with perception. So there's two types of listening tests. There's perceptual evaluation and there's affective evaluation. The main difference is perceptual is a little bit more objective. You use trained listeners, and it's very controlled. Affective evaluation is consumer studies, like get 3,000 consumers and they tell you this, like, which one do you prefer? They're all slightly the same, but they're all slightly different. But that's affective. Like, this logo is better than this one, and they don't explain why, they just say, I like that one. So that's one area of perceptual evaluation. So research areas, binaural rendering, like I talked about. So Facebook, Google, Dolby, a bunch of other university startups have technology that are doing binaural rendering. So it's taking content and trying to reproduce it spatially over headphones. So what THX has embarked on over the last year and a half is trying to understand binaural rendering and trying to create a measurement methodology around it. Another area that we're focused on is user behavior in VR. So VR is new. VR is a infinite feedback loop. So you present something to that user in VR, they can locate it, and they can tell you that they located it. So that is the feedback loop. I can measure what they're doing, and I can use that measurement to provide analytics on how they're behaving in a VR experience. So this is a brief of THX and NYU. So we partnered with NYU about a year and a half ago on research. NYU has a music and audio research laboratory. They just got $500 million from the city of New York to start a VR-only laboratory, which is pretty awesome. And the city of New York is heavily investing in VR, thinking it's the new medium of technology to trying to create jobs with these research labs. So this paper will be posted at AES it's in 2 weeks, right? The 18th through the 22nd. This paper talks about the methodology that we've created. So we're looking at externalization. You listen to a headphone without processing, it sounds in the middle of your head, right? Or maybe a little outside your head, depending on the headphone's design and how well you can hear. Front-back discrimination. So that is, I present a cue here in front of you, and you think it's behind you. And what does that have to do with? Probably the HRTF. So everyone has an HRTF, which is the head-related transfer function. Hang on, I'm gonna get some water. So in order to do rendering, you have a group of HRTFs. And we're all different. We all have different ears, we all have different heads. So all our HRTFs are different. So all these companies create a group of HRTFs that they think is best matches their target audience. And we try and test against that. So elevation discrimination, which is along the azimuth plane, the azimuth plane is this horizontal line. And we're looking at if you have up-down confusion. So if you have a stimuli that's up, did you perceive it to be below you? That also has to do with time alignment between your two ears and a lot to do with the ITD and the ILD inside the HRTF, which is the interaural time delay and the interaural level delay. So azimuth localization to a predefined angle resolution. So we're looking at 360 along the azimuth, and we place a stimuli in all these different areas, and we test the user whether or not that they can accurately locate in which quadrant or which angular resolution that stimuli is. And then you get into, I like to call a quality assessment, which is spectral coloration or timbre or naturalness, center channel focus, Like, does dialogue sound like dialogue, or does it sound strange? This is an example of the GUI that we created. It was all created in MATLAB, which is a wonderful tool, and it's also a pain in the butt. But it allows us to write code. It allows us to analyze that code. It allows us to do a lot of data analysis. So, we're tracking. We have 3 different quantitative, qualitative, and overall, and you put in your ID, and we're tracking, how many users go through and what all the users take this test, this questionnaire that we say, how much music do you listen to? Have you been exposed to VR? Have you exposed to gaming? Do you listen to movies on your laptop? And we're trying to basically pool all these people in the study to try and look at other things that we try and analyze, whether or not if listening to VR is going to make you localize better or not. So a lot of different things like that. So this is a screenshot of the externalization, which is inside your head, which is present a stimuli. Does it sound like it's between your ears? Does it sound in front of you? Does it sound farther in front of you or really far? And these stimuli are all random, and they're all placed in any location along the azimuth, so that everything is randomized. So then we get into localization, which is placing sound objects in one of those areas, and then having the user assess where that sound object is. And the other thing we track inside here is, say that you put, I have a pointer. You put the stimuli at 0 azimuth, which is here, right in front of the person. And they think it's here. So they kind of correctly localized that stimuli because it's in the same quadrant, but it's behind them. So you track that as a front-back discrimination. And then you also get, you can do that in any quadrant. And then we start to look at, if it's an F and they score G, let's analyze that to see if maybe that gives us clues into what the HRTF resolution was of that. Maybe it was, the interpolation was incorrect in that rear quadrant, or angular resolution. So those are other things that are fun. Yeah?
Just to make sure, this is wearing headphones.
Right. Yep. All binaural rendering. All the stimuli is pre-processed. There's no head tracking. You're in a fixed environment. The environment is built to ITU standards. It's all the stimuli is rendered to ITU 7.1. So 0, 30, 30, 170, 270, 180. Can't remember all the angles, but so it's all ITU. So it was like, this is where the loudspeaker is, and the stimuli is done to the right distance. So it could be 3 meters or a meter, not 3 meters. That's very far. Right. Right now, so the sample size is ongoing. We started doing trials this summer semester in New York. To date, we have 40, and we're doing 9 a week through the entire semester. So we should have over 100 in our sample by December, and hopefully more. The more is better for statistical average. But then you kind of throw some of them out because you get noise in your data. But you got to look at that as well. This is a different type of front-back. You play the stimuli, and we play it front of you, back of you, front of you, and then you score whether or not you accurately located the front or the back. And we get into qualitative evaluation, which is There's a bunch of questions. Level of naturalness, timbre balance, clarity, and focus. So in this test, we're doing 6 renders. We're actually assessing 6 different companies. That's why you see 6 different buckets, basically. And you rate them 1 through 5. So you play the sound for audio 1, and you score 1 through 5 on the level of naturalness. 1 being most natural, 5 being least. And you do this 5 times. So you start to get huge chunks of data. And overall preference, so this is rate from least to most preferred. This is actually an old slide. We changed it to forced. It's a forced decision to least. So you listen to all 6 stimuli and you say, I do not like 1. And then you listen to all 5 stimuli and you say, I do not like 4. And you go through until you get to your most preferred. It becomes very hard. Yeah?
What kind of sounds are you playing?
So stimuli is, yeah, that's a good question. We can go back a bunch of slides. So localization, we're using drums. We're using basically kick drums or tom drums, something dynamic that has a repetitive notion. So it's like a 1-3, you know, and then it repeats twice. And for preference or for naturalness, we're doing music. So we took some 5.1 and 7.1 recordings that we got. NYU has a huge music department, so we did a bunch of recordings and put those all in there. And then for movies, we took some clips from Star Wars, believe it or not, and The Force Awakens, and we took a dialogue scene, we took action scene, and another half dialogue, half action scene. All the clips are 2 minutes, and we actually removed the visual stimuli. So there is no visual bias in this kind of study. And that's for the naturalness part and for the overall preference. You either we randomize whether or not you're going to listen to music or movie. So not everyone listens to everything. Here is a slide showing localization and externalization. So you can see these values on the right don't really matter because they're all single stimulus assessments. But you can kind of see that we're getting differences amongst all the renderers on externalization. These are pretty tight. I believe 5 is worst in this one. So we're actually seeing good clusters of behavior on externalization. And we can look at the stimuli and see, like, that stimuli may not be good. I don't know. That stimuli is probably not good at all because your confidence interval is very high. And in localization, we're also seeing kind of pretty good behavior. And stimuli, seems to be quite normal. Let me get into some music understanding. So naturalness of music. 4.49 is actually the worst answer. So that renderer was graded worst almost all of the time. And 2.63, 2.1 is the best. And the stimuli 0 is kind of the outlier a little bit, but it's not the outlier on 3. And then we look at stimuli 1 and 2, and that's a jazz ensemble, and seems to be scoring pretty good. But you can see that we're actually getting meaningful data that shows that there is a difference between rendering methodologies. And then the same for clarity of music. Like, that one's the best. One's a little bit behind that. And then obviously 4 is still performing terribly. But that's why we do this. Yep.
So you're presuming that all the study participants, when they're checking for spaciousness and or naturalness and or clarity,
Right.
that they all have the same ability to detect naturalness and clarity, and that may or may not be correct.
Yeah, that's also, human behavior.
Okay, well, there's
Yeah.
there's
No,
behavior, but there's also perceptual ability.
Right,
And-
right.
And if you don't recognize that that's a possibility, it might be weighing some of your
Yes. Yeah, no,
some of your
that's-
grading, and it could be that you have no choice but to accept that
Right.
there are a fair number of people that have better ability to detect clarity or naturalness than others.
Right.
But your goal is to find apparently the best overall renderer for all people
Right.
across the things you're checking.
Right. Yeah, and naturalness and clarity are very closely related in definition. So this is a huge debate amongst all the researchers. Like, why do we have naturalness and clarity?
Agree.
Because they're kind of the same. So everyone gets presented these definitions before they take the test.
And do they get an explanation of the
Right.
definitions? So,
Yes,
okay,
they do.
here's what this means, here's what that means, and then can they consult those definitions as they're going through the process in case they're not familiar and they forget?
They could, but we chose not to consult during the
Okay.
test because then we're, as an assessor or assessor moderator, you are kind of biasing the assessor once you talk to them. Once they start the test,
Then
and
you-
they start going through, and then they ask a
Okay.
question, they're like, then there's like, well, you shouldn't have talked to them.
Okay,
So kind of
okay,
throughout the
so,
game.
so the rules are, they get a Zot to recognize what's there.
Right.
But once they start, you leave, I understand that position, although if you are an untrained listener,
Right.
it might be difficult to follow through with that.
Right. And the reason that we're doing this at the university is all of these students are in music.
They're all in the music department?
They're all in the music department.
Okay.
So
Very
they
good.
all have some degree of understanding of how music should sound.
You would hope.
I would hope.
You would hope.
I would hope,
I
but-
I might offer information to the contrary sometime.
I'm sure that you can. I'm sure that I will decide whether or not to dump one of these questions.
Yeah.
Because once you start to analyze the data and you analyze the data sets of those individuals, you might see correlation that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I got to throw that one out.
Yeah,
And
and it
that's-
might be because of their varying abilities, and
Right.
that's the reason I brought it up.
No, I totally, I like that. I like that debate.
Okay.
That's why we're trying to do this is try and understand. Like, nobody else is making a methodology of understanding binaural rendering amongst groups of binaural renderers. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's a hard problem, though.
Right.
It's
Yep.
multidimensional in ways you
Yep.
might not think when you start.
Oh yeah. Well, we ran a pilot in February, and we were like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, agree. It's good.
Let's do another pilot.
Yeah, cool.
So it's
Okay, thank you.
yeah, no problem. We can go back to this spaciousness and temporal balance. We consistently see number 4 as the outlier of the worst rating, which is still there. And it's consistent. And it's consistent that 1 and 0 and 2 are usually playing around in first and second amongst all the stuff. And 5 is usually down at the bottom. But we're still seeing trends that some stimuli may be better. And that's kind of where we're at. And then we go into overall. We do an overall preference. And then the key to overall, one second, is to correlate the overall ranking with other rankings. So if you say renderer 0 is my favorite renderer, but renderer 0 is actually scoring like 4, what is going on there? Either that assessor is bad and their noise, or we're looking at something else that's affecting quality that we haven't been able to measure yet. So that you get into this weird statistical analysis that is going to lead to a lot of things. I think right now we're going to end up with about 300,000 data points that we're going to have to analyze. When this test is over, it's going to be a big chunk of data, and we're going to publish probably 2 or 3 papers out of this study that we're doing. Like I said, the methodology will be out. You can download it at AES. I think beginning next week. It'll for sure be out the week of the 16th. So that was perception, one of the things that we're doing. Let's move on to, unless anyone has any questions. Right?
I was just going to ask, are you able to tell us what renderer number 4 is, or are these all like pre-production?
These are publicly available companies or publicly available tools. I will not tell anyone which renderers these are. I signed a bunch of contracts to be able to do this study. Yeah, so. Right. You can look at the landscape and think of the top 6. I don't know. That's some clue.
Do the companies get the feedback?
The companies get the feedback of so if I go to company X and I say, you're renderer 0, they get that data. And I will not tell them which other renderers are in the study, but I will tell them this is how you performed, and this is our findings. Right? This is a different study that we're doing. VR localization and user behavior, which kind of is a derivative work of the last study, but it's in VR, so we have a feedback loop put on the headset. I present a stimuli here, and I can track the way that you resolve that stimuli. So it's here, and you looked to the right, and then you looked to the left, and then you found it. So what is that behavior? I don't know. Don't know yet. But if I see it amongst a group of people that are going to the right and then going to the left to resolve a spatial cue behind them, then I can kind of see a trend that this is how people are resolving cues in this hemisphere or this location. And the reason we're doing this is to, one, understand renderers again, understand user behavior, and then hopefully this all translates to how do you make VR content compelling from a movie standpoint or cinematic or game. If you present an off-screen stimuli, like I call it, like you're watching a movie and you have a sound over here and you're like, oh, something's happening off-screen. In VR, you have a 360 screen, but you're presenting sounds off-screen by doing something back here. How long does that stimuli need to play? What's the shape of the stimuli? Like, what's the dynamic range? What's the frequencies that's most compelling to get that user to go this way? Because as a game designer or a sound designer, you want to know how to direct the user in the experience. So this is Simon Cowley. He's one of my researchers. He did this study as his master's thesis at NYU. And this is him playing the game a bunch of times using different renderers like Oculus, Real Space. This is localization behavior. So you can see that, there's a difference in air, elevation air and azimuth air. And over time, he's doing quite well in real space, and he's doing less on Oculus. That's good. So what else we can do inside this tool is, like I said, we can change the renderer. That's Oculus or Facebook or whatever, same as every company that's making a renderer for VR. We can change the HRTF data set. So we can say, this HRTF is better than this one. Everyone in my research group has a real HRTF. We went and sat in a lab and got measured anechoically, and it's quite fun. But so we're using our real HRTFs to assess localization behavior and the quality of the engine. So that each engine interpolates HRTFs differently. What we're measuring is the deviation of interpolation, right? Audiogram, does that play? Is my hearing deficiency or not causing problems in localization? Could be. I don't have a hearing deficiency, but could. Headphone EQ, is there a preferred headphone equalization response? Go back to Sean Olive and talk about headphone response, preferred response. Is there a preferred headphone EQ that's going to make me localize better in VR? These are variables that we can pull out in this engine that we've created. This is a sample, just a screenshot of it. That's your pointer. It's in the center of your nose. And then we have a generalized HRTF test, personalized. And we do an ITD test where we change there's a snowman model, which is a perfectly round sphere that says that's an HRTF. So we can play around with the snowman model and manipulate the ITD of the HRTF set to see if we can localize better in the azimuth plane in this frontal hemisphere only. So you place a Q at 30, and you say, it's here, and I got 20. Okay, there's a deviation. Let's manipulate the ITD, do the test again. I got 25. Okay, I'm getting closer. Manipulate again. And then continually manipulate the ITD spherical head model to see if we can hone in on what my ITD is. So then, after I take that ITD test, I have my HRTF. I can analyze that ITD that I generated in the game against my measured ITD. And there's a bunch of analytics that we allow the user to see. Then we have this huge cloud of that we run analytics on an AWS server that's getting bigger and bigger. It's fun. So what else do we do? Engineering, obviously. This is our 2-pi baffle room in San Francisco. We put speakers in the baffle wall or in pseudo 4-pi to measure speakers and finish boxes and transducers. It's fun. Got a lot of old gear. It's pretty cool. What else? Transducer design, acoustic package design, DSP processing. We do signal processing and evaluate signal processing. That's one of the perception evaluation areas we do. Like, let's make a signal processing topology of a compressor. Let's listen to the compressor, because not all compressors do the same thing. And acoustic measurement, obviously. And then we do displays, OLED, LED, LCD, plasma, 4K. That's more for certification and for the film movie industry. That's my friend, Kimar. I use him a lot. He's got microphones in his head. I did this measurement in our home theater, which is Dolby Atmos 7.2.4 configuration. And I did a 7.1 measurement of all the binaural room impulse response of each of those speaker locations, much like what Smith Research does. We measure the impulse response of that speaker, and then I run that through the processes, and I can make headphones sound like that speaker in that location with that guy. And it's a collection of behavior studies of auditory events. That is a bunch of graphs of the locations in that room. It's kind of hard to really figure out what that is, but in front of you, you're going to get different peaks as opposed to the right or behind you. You get shading on your face, and you get ITDs and ILDs from all that. The speaker's on the left. The distance it takes for you to travel from this ear to this ear is the ITD and ILD. This is some measurement stuff that we have. This is a Grass 45CA, 711 couplers. That's a 43 dB, which is a very low noise and low signal measurement microphone. It can measure down to 5 dBA, which is below human threshold of hearing. We use that for, I don't know, having fun. I haven't really figured out why I need to measure at 5 dBA, because it's super sensitive. Like, you have the mic out there, and I can pick it up. It's crazy. But it's cool. This is an example of some headphone measurements I did on the HD 650. And I was trying to look at what the ear, the Pinna, is doing on the HD 650. And the Pinna is that big pink line, and this is no Pinna. So obviously, the Pinna is causing a lot of boost at 2K. And then you get these same interactions of standing waves inside the ear canal. This is a tool that THX created internally that allows us to do math on waveforms or on measurements. These are a bunch of headphones I was looking at. And I can divide anything by anything. I can interpolate, I can rotate, square root, I don't know, just anything that you can think of that you want to do with math and frequency, this tool does it. The division of the measurement against the diffuse field drum reference point HRTF of key mark. So you see, like, it tilts down, it looks more flat. And the top one is the unequalized measurement. This is a IIR filter tool that we have. So let's say you want to make a filter of the headphone, and you want to match what that frequency response is, and then manipulate it in post-processing later, or make an HD 800 sound like a 650, or any other imaginary thing you can think of. That tool allows us to do that, and then it spits out all these coefficients, and we throw that in DSP, and we try and manipulate what we're trying to find out. That is all I got right now. Thanks.
A question, you mentioned some VR and AR applications. Do you see any? Hello. Hi. You mentioned some VR applications, some of the stuff you guys are working on. And one of the common issues that people have talked about with VR, AR is certainly nausea, especially as you get older.
Right.
It's not comfortable for folks to be in that environment for a while. Do you see audio as having an effect on people's motion sickness or any of that stuff, or is it very much visually?
I think there's some correlation to audio and nausea. It may have to do with the HRTF set. Like, if you're hearing sound stimuli that doesn't match with your anatomy, it may cause you to get sick. I haven't done any research on that. I think a lot of it has to do with visual, like motion blur and shakiness. The quality of displays just aren't high enough yet, really. I mean, they're getting there, but once OLED really, like once Apple stops buying all the OLED, I think we'll see OLED sneak into VR headsets, and then it'll come, that visual experience will get better. But yeah, I haven't seen any papers that lead me to think that audio isn't or is an issue with nausea. So yeah, more studies I think will come. Yeah. Anything else?
So the HRTF, you're saying that with a certain a stimulus that's like right in front of you, that some people will perceive that as being in back of them
Right.
instead.
Right.
What kind of percentage of people does that happen in usually? How common is that?
It's very common, actually. It's called the cone of confusion. It's been well documented in research. There's also this area off to the right and to the left that is hard to localize exactly. On a poor resolution HRTF, you're going to get over, I think over 70% of front-back confusions.
Wow.
Like it's pretty significant that you see this error. If you look at the data of front-back discriminations on the research, I don't think I have that graph in here.
And what is the cause of that? Is it just neurological differences between people, or is it the
Physical differences.
Physical? Wow.
Right.
Interesting.
So my head is a different size than your head. My ears are a different shape. And frontal is all about getting the correct time. So if you have a speaker at 0, an imaginary speaker at 0, the stimuli should arrive at the left ear and the right ear at the same time of that HRTF set. If your head is wider or narrower than that HRTF, it's going to arrive differently than that HRTF. So then you're going to kind of be confused and not be able to understand. I can probably pull up that graph. 1 second. We'll look at front-back discrimination. Yeah, more up-down discrimination, front-back, there you go, 70% of the time. Higher score is better. Low score, that's number 4 again. He's consistently giving me confidence that I'm not crazy. Yeah, so you see a little bit of 70% of the time you score accurately amongst this group of people.
Have a question about the Pinna
Right.
performance curve of frequency response that you showed.
Right.
It looks suspiciously like the reasonable quality headphones and the Pinna have a similar characteristic, and that would be expected if
Right.
the job of headphones is trying to do a good job of
Mimicking a
hearing,
speaker.
what's coming towards your face, what is shifted by this. If you do flat frequency response in headphones and fire it in your ear at the side, it's not going to sound reasonable, and all those angle and timing cues are going to be off. And,
Right.
and that particular one there that you're showing probably is not exactly matching the Pinna, although I can't tell exactly.
This is a different headphone.
Yeah, that's a really different headphone. Several of the other ones you had a particular character, and then when you
Right.
showed here's the Pinna response, I said,
Yeah.
oh yeah, those are matching. Now they're not exact, and the folks that build them tune them differently.
Right.
But have you found then that those headphones that you use in your research that more or less match the Pinna response give you the best localization cues?
Right, that's the research that we're trying to do is does this headphone with this ingrained kind of response make me localize better? because it does have,
Yeah, a certain
The
flavor of
yeah.
up and down and
yeah,
up.
because it does have a characteristic of a diffuse field response,
Yeah.
which is speakers in a room.
Yeah, yeah, and if people are mostly used to listening to sound coming at them from the outside, and then you put them in an environment in headphones, you would think that the best way you could emulate that would be emulate that diffuse field. I think the Stax guys tried that first a long time ago with their
Right.
ED1 equalizer.
Right.
And that actually, I bought one of those. It actually had a pretty decent effect. It wasn't perfect, but there was some research in Germany that had researched that, and I'm interested to see that they're still trying to follow a reasonable kind of Pinna and HRTF response
Right.
to get good localization. Thank you.
Right. Yep. No problem.
If the front to back error
Right.
is so high,
Right.
does that not point to that the solution is just to have individual HRTF values for
That
each person, and that you're not really going to be able to have a system that's going to function for everyone?
Right, that's the dream. Is can I efficiently measure consumers and get an accurate answer? I doubt every consumer is going to want to go sit in an anechoic chamber for 4 hours to get a high-resolution HRTF. It's not economical or feasible. There's a bunch of companies working on means of doing image-based capture. So they take a two-dimensional image or a three-dimensional image using a depth camera like a Tango or whatever, and they try and simulate an HRTF from a 3D mesh. There's a bunch of research going on about that right now everywhere, like S3A, URCAM, University of Sydney, University of Padova in Italy, all of Fraunhofer, in Germany. Everyone's trying to figure that out, and it's complicated. It's still expensive because you're doing FM-BEM analysis of a HRTF. So you're trying to simulate that scan of a person inside an anechoic chamber in the cloud on a bunch of servers basically, and doing this finite modeling, which takes hours.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that pans out, because one application which springs to mind for me, I sit on a plane a lot, and obviously to have that kind of sound with headphones on the plane, you're not going to be able to have that kind of analysis done.
Right.
But I guess that doing it for movies is a goal. But
Movies for and gaming.
it will take some time to get there. Like gaming is a bit more feasible because most people that are doing VR are probably going to have the resources to take a picture of both
Right.
sides of the head or what have you. Whereas
Right.
for watching a movie, you're probably not going to have.
Well, it depends on this new paradigm of people watching and consuming content. Like millennials, I guess, more and more watch content on phones and laptops. Like, what percentage of people do you know that have a Dolby Atmos home theater in their house? Not a lot, right? Nothing wrong with that, but that's not the way content is being consumed. Content is being consumed on headphones. A lot. So if you are playing games is all object-oriented. It's all object sounds. So if you design an engine that can look at AAC, OpenAL, or any other open source object, you could certainly plug in an HRTF engine into a phone, or to a tablet, or to a laptop. The processing's there. I mean, there's dedicated signal processors in every device that you have for audio. Whether it's not known to the consumers that they have an audio processing thing in their device, but that's the future. Right?
Thanks.
Yep.
Patrick, have you started doing any research on for the cone of confusion? Anything on head tracking or even visuals that aid in alleviating the cone of confusion. For example, for me, I find it very easy to remove the cone of confusion if I have head tracking.
10 minutes. He's saying 10 minutes. I haven't done any. I'm trying to remove that bias right now of visual. I think there is definitely something there, looking at head tracking and how you can resolve better. Because when you're presented a cue in front of you and you have head tracking, your brain or your mind or your head is subconsciously moving left and right to figure out this locational difference. You don't know that you do it, but you do it. You go like this, and then you can resolve that frontal cue. But I want to see, what I'm trying to see is what is the effect without that in play? Can you get good results of this front-back confusion without tracking the head? There's tons of research that says head tracking is the best for localization behavior, but they all do it differently. I'm trying to remove all these biases from every company that I'm analyzing. I'm removing rooms, I'm removing reflections, I'm removing any sort of variable that would add coloration to my research. So I think derivative research I will do more with head tracking, but right now I'm trying to figure out if the methodology is sound, and then I can add new things into the methodology after. Right? I think that was a long-winded answer to trying to figure out where that's going. Anybody else? You have another question, Sankar? No? All right, rock and roll. Let's, thanks.